What's up, guys? This is Chad at All Dogs Off-Road, and today we're going to be walking you through a little bit of a brake upgrade and also a little bit of experimentation, at least for the 3rd gen Nissan Frontiers. On 2nd gen Nissan Frontiers, if you're running a 17-inch or larger wheel, there's a pretty nice budget-friendly big brake upgrade available to you from our 51 Pathfinders that had the VK56 V8 engine in them. So they had a larger rotor and caliper setup on those than the V6 Pathfinders did. And what a lot of Nissan guys can do, like I said, if they're running a 17-inch or larger wheel, is step up and braking power, braking size with these V8 Pathfinder rotors and calipers. Kyle's already done this upgrade on his blue 2nd gen Frontier. I think it was a year or two ago, and if I remember correctly, we didn't have enough time to shoot a video for that install. But we're here with the 3rd gen Frontier, and we're gonna do it for you. Come join us on a little adventure. That's so heavy. So on a stock truck, you probably don't need to do something like this, but with larger tires, and then also with a lot more added weight, you're going to notice that your stopping power is decreased quite a bit. And I noticed this daily driving, coming up to stoplights or stop signs, that sort of thing. It takes me quite a bit more time to come to a full stop now than it did before the build out, before the Super Pacific camper and the weight in the bed and then the larger 33-inch tires. If you're going to be building a heavy rig or go to bigger tires, brakes are often a neglected or forgot about component for upgrading. How are you catching up to me so fast? Like, what the fuck? So if you ever worked on brakes before, this should be a pretty straightforward and pretty simple upgrade for you. You're going to take your 2 bolts off your caliper here, and then break your hard line, and the caliper comes off. You're going to just remove your rotor. One thing you'll have to do as well is you're going to have to bend your dust shield here when you fit your new caliper into place. One thing you can also do is you can actually buy the dust shield from a V8 Pathfinder that would actually appropriately size itself to the rotor. But in order to get to that, you actually have to take the whole hub assembly off, and these hubs are still fine. At a point where these hubs or wheel bearings go bad, then I'll probably buy those sheet metal dust covers and swap them out. They're really inexpensive. I think they were like $7 or $8 a piece. And also, I forgot to mention that this whole upgrade here is pretty inexpensive. I think we're maybe $200 or $300. We'll show you real quick for demonstration purposes the difference in size of the calipers here between the two. I think it's about, if I remember correctly, it's about an inch difference in diameter. So it's quite a bit beefier. But we'll start getting to work here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the caliper. There are 2 bolts that are holding it into place, 1, 2, and I'm going to kind of push it out of the way. And probably before I change the caliper out for the new one, I'll take the rotor off and size everything and make sure to clearance the dust shield accordingly. And so basically we'll get the rotor in place, and then we'll get the caliper over and transfer the brake line, and then we'll go to the other side as well, and then we'll just bleed the brakes. Jesus. So we've got our 2 bolts out, and now we're just going to take the caliper and pull it off. And then the rotor is just going to float there. So typically you don't want this to dangle, you don't want to put stress on your line there, so you zip tie it up or something. Fucking with you. Oh. Okay. So there's your old rotor. And here is your new rotor. It's a little bit bigger. So what we're going to do first is, I mentioned that we're going to have to clearance the dust shield, because you see if you push it in, you're probably going to be scraping on the back. Actually, I'm not scraping at all, so maybe I don't have to do anything there. I recall on Kyle's, I think he did have to bend the shield a little bit or get it out of the way. We're going to leave that there for now, and then what we're going to do is, because this is the first time on a 3rd gen Frontier, probably just going to take the caliper and just hand tight the bolts and then test fit the wheel just to make sure that we have adequate clearances before we go ahead and crack the brake lines and start making permanent modifications. Okay. So your brake calipers are side specific. So one will be marked L, one will be marked R. Passenger side is your right hand side, driver's side is your left hand side. So what we're doing is we've got everything kind of just mocked, test fitted right now. So I don't have the brake pads in, obviously. I just want to have everything in place, then put the wheel on, make sure that we have adequate clearance on the inside, and then we will proceed from there. We've got the new parts on, we've got the wheel on. I've got 2 lug nuts in just so that I can make sure everything is pulled tight, snug, and just checking for clearance, nothing rubs. I'm going to get on the creeper and check the backside really quickly. She's good. Now that we know that everything fits, we can just proceed without really worrying. So we'll take the wheel off. We'll break the brake line off the old caliper, swap it over, try to lose as little fluid as possible. Do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll get the brakes bled, and it should be basically done. These trucks, the factory manual calls for .4 fluid, so make sure you have .4 if you're going to do this. So when you're doing your brakes, you will want to use a little bit of brake grease. You can use, sometimes kits will come with little mini packets of grease. We actually have a big thing of it here that we use, and you just want to get your little slots where the caliper rides. Just a tiny bit here, and then you can put a little bit on the backing plates of the pads, and that just kind of keeps everything from squeaking and making noise. Now, there are 2 different types of clips. So you'll have one that's got these wings on it, and one that does not have the wings. The one that does not have the wings is going to go up at the top here. The one with the wings is going down, and then your pads will have little brackets on them. There's a little bit of springiness here, so these actually act as like your anti-rattle clips. So when you're not braking, they're putting a little bit of positive outward pressure on the pads to try and separate them. So we got the rotor and the caliper and the pads all in place, ready to go. The last thing on this side will be to transfer the hydraulic line. So this is a 12 mil. We'll break this loose and then transfer it over. And then typically there are some copper crush washers as well. So you want to make sure that your banjo, your crush washers, everything, you typically want to start with new, and I believe all the hardware is here. So we'll do that here in just a second. So now we're going to break loose, and this is going to dump fluid, but don't worry about that because we're going to refill it. Make sure you got your banjo ready with your copper crush washers. You'll have one on either side here of the banjo itself, so it'll look like that when you bolt it in. There we go. Basically, we've got everything in place. So rotors on, calipers on, hard line has been transferred with new crush washers. I'm reusing the factory bolt because it's a 12 mil versus the 10 mil that came with the hardware packet, so I'm sticking with the OE there. But this side is all done, so we'll go do the same thing to the other side, hopefully a lot quicker and smoother. And then we'll be able to bleed the brakes and give her a test drive. Very soft. We're pumping the brakes right now. It's getting firm. Firm. Yep. Good. Now you ran into an interesting little situation. Both the caliper and the bracket were marked L for left and R for right, and we followed those instructions and had them on their correct corresponding sides. But what we found is that the bleeders were pointing down rather than up. And really, when you're bleeding brakes, you want your bleeders up and not down, so that they start to collect air bubbles when you're bleeding brakes, so that you can get all your air out of the system. So we ended up having to, after we got everything bled, we stopped, looked at it, and we weren't getting really firm pedal feel. So we swapped the calipers side to side and got our bleeders back up in the correct orientation to up, and now we're going to go and bleed again. So when you're doing this, make sure that your bleeder screws are at the upper portion of the caliper and not down toward the lower. So we got our brakes all bled, all the bubbles are out of the system. We're going to throw the wheels back on, put it on the ground, and take it for a test drive, see how it feels. Yeah, it feels better. So we just took her for a test drive and did some stopping, and it definitely feels like it's stopping sooner than it used to. With the factory brakes, I was noticing I would really have to push on the pedal to come to a stop, kind of like I would normally before the camper and the extra weight on the vehicle. So I feel like this has probably at the very least got me back to normal. If not, it might have a little bit more stopping power. I think I'll probably need to put more miles on it in order to really notice it. But I'll definitely update you guys in the comments. Thank you for joining along. I don't like doing brakes, so I'm much more comfortable with suspension and drivetrain gear work, that sort of thing. So I'm glad that Kyle and Michael helped quite a bit there. If you had fun, like, subscribe, come and learn cool stuff like this with us. Nissans are probably the best platform there are for interchangeability and OEM upgrades. So, peace.